It's critical employers have a process to identify and control the work activities that may cause harm.
Laminex is the leading marketer and distributor of board products. A review of our data shows that most of our injuries in the past have occurred from manual handling.
Of all the injuries we have on our sites, the majority of our injuries are to do with guys handling materials.
Businesses are finding that the productivity gains and the improvements to worker health and safety far outweigh the efforts required to manage hazardous manual tasks.
Our primary focus has been to reduce injuries, but we've found with some of the control measures that we've put in place, we've had an added and unexpected benefit of increased productivity and reduced cost.
A hazardous manual task is a task that involves one or more of the following risk factors: repetitive or sustained force, high or sudden force, repetitive movement, sustained or awkward posture, exposure to vibration.
With the Rio, the risk with 15-metre bars is it takes 2 men to carry. The movements they perform are very repetitive, so it tends to be pick up, put down, pick up, put down. They tend to do a lot of twisting, bending. All the bars they pick up from the ground, so there's a lot of lifting involved.
The more hazardous risks that we found tend to involve a lot of repetitive action. Anything that involves lifting, pulling or pushing, moving awkward shape product, and anything that involves lots of repetitive movement.
In addition, there is a direct link between musculoskeletal disorders and occupational stress. Businesses need to control the physical risks and also consider the workers' perception and experience in their environment. Employers can manage hazardous manual task risks by going through the risk management process. You can identify your hazardous manual tasks by observing workers performing the task and see if they involve one or more of the risk factors. Consult with your workers and find out where they think the problems are. Review workplace info such as injury and incident reports and inspection reports, and look for trends or problem tasks, assessing new tasks or processes, or when changes are made. Management commitment is critical in all steps of the process. It is also important to actively engage with your workers through every step of the process.
Once we get out there and the guys get involved, they can come up with some better ideas and we can then revise the process and do it in a slightly different way.
We involved the workers who were actually performing the task. We also had our occupational health and safety coordinator involved in it and various supervisors in the warehouse. Often the best ideas to resolve safety issues come from our workers. We've identified all the manual handling tasks in our warehouse and we put those into a spreadsheet. So that gave us a ranking of our manual handling tasks from the most difficult and most risky down to the most simple and least risky.
To assess if there is a risk of MSD, you've got to determine the following. Does the task involve repetitive movement, sustained or awkward postures, and repetitive or sustained forces? If you have one or more of these, you then need to assess whether the task is done over a long period of time. By that I mean that the task is done for more than 2 hours over a whole shift, or continuously for more than 30 minutes at a time. Identify if the task involves high or sudden force. You should also identify if the task involves prolonged exposure to vibration. If any of the risk factors are identified, there is a risk of an MSD occurring. You need to identify what is causing these risks and then implement the most appropriate controls. The things that are causing the risks include the work area design and layout, the nature, size, weight and number of things handled, the system of work, and the environment in which the manual task is performed. These are the things that need to be changed to eliminate or reduce the risk of MSD.
One of the control measures that we wanted to implement was to put in an automated strapping machine, and that created some challenges for us. One, we had to get some significant investment to do that.
The way we used to strap the packs was on the front of a forklift. That was something else that we really wanted to get rid of there. So just a repetition of doing that over and over again. By bringing in the strapping unit, we've eliminated that.
Yeah, we're extremely satisfied. We've been able to remove 80% of our manual strapping from the warehouse, so that's literally hundreds of thousands of manual handling tasks removed annually.
The 15-metre bars the engineers designed generally take 2 guys to carry with the weights. So we looked at reducing those bar lengths, so we talked at length with the Rio fixers doing the initial car park here about what they felt was an optimum length for a bar to be carried. They basically said to us about 7.5 metres was about what they could manage on a deck. So we went back to the engineer and we looked at turning those 15s into 7.5s to make it easier.
So we had some significant injuries in the business using ratchet binders and binder bars.
We just had manual ratchets and they'd put them in a socket and just wrench them up.
Our deliveries involve 20 multiple drops per day. We thought there has to be a better way.
One of the big moves was to try and eliminate that hazard from the workplace. And so we went to the pneumatic binders, which tension themselves.
They just pull a button, the air comes in, tightens it up, and they close the valve down, and that's the job done.
The other main thing we looked at here was the concrete supply. So generally on construction projects, engineers always specify an 80mm slump on their concrete. That, for the guys on the deck, is very, very hard to screed, as we specified a 100mm slump to get away from that problem. That's paid dividends here with the guys working here. Just makes it easier for the guys to screed the concrete and move the concrete, and reduces those shoulder strains, back strains that you tend to get with concreters. And so we'll get a better quality product at the end because the guys have got more time to take a bit more care over it.
Monitoring and review. And this is really critical in ensuring that you don't introduce any new risk factors and that the solution is actually working.
We continually review our control measures. We also find that sometimes we can improve on original control measures that were put in place.
My advice probably to our other contractors would be just take that time at the beginning to think about what you want people to actually do and what you're asking workers to do, and just say to yourself, would I be prepared to do that and could I do that? Because if you say no, I wouldn't be prepared to do it and I can't do it, then you shouldn't really be expecting someone else to do that.
It's not always easy to eliminate these, but involve your workers in the process. Solutions will come to the fore. Be persistent and you will get the job done.